All right, so I want to try to do a quick one here on GLP-1s, even though this is probably like 35 minutes that I've been trying to make this video. GLP-1s are still obviously a hot topic of conversation. They're going to continue to be a hot topic of conversation. They're not going away anytime soon. And the conversation, in my opinion, has only gotten better and better and better as the landscape of where these drugs are being used has kind of shifted into the performance enhancement world. Obviously, once we get into that world, we're looking at people that do a little bit more, that we explore. We're not governed like research is, right? In a way where we have to, obviously, again, there's governing bodies, there is ethics involved, there is all these different things. So those studies are going to be very specific to getting these drugs indicated for particular usage, FDA approved, all this different stuff, right? Once the world of performance enhancement gets control of it, it's like, let's do whatever the hell we want to do in terms of the way that we think this drug might work best. But the reality is all evidence. We have anecdotal evidence, we have some clinical information, some preclinical information available, and now we can utilize that, all that information to the best of our abilities, right? So with all that being said, again, I think the conversation has improved here dramatically for the most part, okay? The point behind this video is that we still have a lot of uneducated coaches, right, that primarily deal with your general population clients, right? They're nutritionists, dietitians, or coaches, right, that are working primarily with general population clients. And they're still screaming about how destructive these drugs are. Even, let's make this clear too. At this point in the game, I don't see many people utilizing Wegovy anymore, or semaglutide. I just don't. I think that we all understand at this point, right, that semaglutide is a very appetite suppression is what you're going to get out of that drug. That's a primary thing. And obviously there's going to be some secondary benefits there, but for the most part, the number one thing that you're going to get out of that is full-on food aversion. Your first trimester pregnant, when it comes to the way that your body is, not that I would know, but it seems very much that way, right? That you are completely and totally adverse to food. There's going to be days where you eat 500 calories, 700 calories, 1,000 calories is a good day when you're on, even like 2 milligrams, 3 milligrams of semaglutide. All right, but again, I don't see a lot of people utilizing semaglutide anymore. I most certainly don't see it getting prescribed very often anymore. We've now switched to tirzepatide in that clinical space, where tirzepatide is probably the primary drug being, at least from what I'm seeing with my clientele, being prescribed, right? And now, again, this is where a big problem comes in. If we're seeing a drug like tirzepatide that has a ton of overall benefits, you can improve a client's health, improve their fat loss, right? You can improve their, even honestly, their sense of like confidence, their sense of being able to stick to a plan and being able to get a real result, right? Especially in some really hard cases, to be able to move forward. Once we start implementing this drug at tirzepatide, things start to go in the right direction. And all of a sudden, I've told all my clients this, you guys all know this, right? My whole concept is, hey, if you adhere to the plan and we get you results, you are going to be motivated, and that creates this cycle that continues. Once you're motivated, you want to adhere even better. You get better results, and then you continue that motivation, and you continue that cycle, right? If I have to utilize tirzepatide, right, to be able to get somebody that result that gets them motivated to keep going, then so be it, right? As long as we're doing it in the smartest way possible, in the healthiest way possible, and there's real, I guess we'll call it need for the application of this drug, then let's do it. Right? But again, I think where the real problem comes in here is that, again, in that clinical space, we're getting prescribed this, right? When you get prescribed this drug, you're getting it in one way and one way only. You're going to get one injection. It's going to be a particular dosage. And because the coach that's demonizing this drug has not done any information on it, right? They've built no knowledge, education, or background in terms of understanding this drug. Right? So all they're doing is potentially fighting with their client about not utilizing. Meanwhile, the client's over here talking to the doctor, they're getting a great result. They go back to the doctor. The doctor's like, all right, time to go from 2.5 milligrams to 5 milligrams. And that's where the problem is. That's where the problem is for most people. Right? We probably don't need to go from 2.5 to 5 milligrams, especially not at the rate at which we're seeing that happen in most cases when we're getting prescribed the Zepbound, right, or the tirzepatide. Right? It happens relatively quickly, and there's probably not enough time for that person to get full value out of that 2.5 milligrams before they would consider going to 5 milligrams, which again, I think is a big increase in and of itself to double the dosage that way. Right? So that the first problem here is that we're so against utilizing these compounds that you haven't had the conversation with your client to go back to that doctor and say, hey doc, I don't need 5 milligrams. I want to stay at 2.5 mgs, and I want to stay there for an extended period of time. Right? I want to continue to get better at my foundational, process here as far as weight loss is concerned, and I want to see what this 2.5 milligrams does over an extended period of time. All right, that's step number one. Step number two is, now I know this is going to be controversial, but at the end of the day, we have different opportunities now to acquire these drugs. Right, you can get a GLP, you can get retatrutide that's not clinically available at this point. Right, you can get tirzepatide and retatrutide extremely easily at this point. Right, and at the end of the day, and I know again that might be a questionable concept for a lot of people, that they're going to go to an online gray market website to get it versus a doctor having that kind of overseen and or insurance covering it, which is always a nice concept if they would cover. But the bottom line here is, when we go this other route, we do have a much more controlled concept in place in terms of dosing, right, and how we're going to utilize that drug to get the most out of it and still be able to get that client to develop what they need to develop in terms of the skill set to not only get them the result that they're looking for from an overall health and fitness perspective, but also be able to sustain that result even after the utilization of these GLP-1s, right? So once we kind of look at this through that lens, or through that secondary lens of, okay, now I'm taking into consideration not just all the clinical information that's available, but also all the anecdotal information that's available, right, and all the resources I have at my disposal. At the end of the day, these drugs are not just drugs that are going to come in and be something. First and foremost, we need to stop with the concept that these are going to reduce all of your or destroy all your muscle tissue, hinder all of your performance, right? And I heard somebody say the other day, they're going to, literally the exact verbiage was, they're destroying all the muscle tissue. I hate seeing them destroy all the muscle tissue that clients have worked so hard for. That's nonsense. It's complete and total nonsense when they're being used the right way. Again, you need to help that client use that the right way. Right? So again, I think at the end of the day, I guess the point behind the video is essentially that we're still demonizing these drugs, which now not only creates a conflict with the clients that are already being prescribed these drugs or utilizing these drugs, right? It creates a conflict with your ability to be able to, potentially get somebody that could utilize these drugs to their benefits for their overall health outcomes and weight loss, but maybe they don't have the insurance that's going to cover these drugs. Maybe they don't want to go to the doctor for whatever reason to be able to get these drugs. You're so misinformed on it that it's not even a tool in your arsenal. But yet I could lower this guy's apo-lipo-Bs from 160 down to 120 in a matter of weeks just by utilizing this compound and preventing him from being prescribed Repatha and ezetimibe. Like, at the end of the day, again, you have to be able to do the due diligence there, not just from the perspective of, hey, this could be ultimately beneficial for me in terms of the way that I help my clients, but it's also one of those things where you have to understand this isn't going away anytime soon. It's not. It's going to be here for it's never going away. Let's be real. It's only going to get better, right? It's only going to get better. And you're going to see a lot of these coaches change their tune too. Watch, right? If your coach right now, right, your nutritionist right now, whoever you're working with right now is telling you that these things are bad, watch them change their tune. And of course, they're going to utilize whatever generation of drugs, right, swears that it's going to help with muscle maintenance, right, or prevent muscle tissue breakdown over time, right, by whatever new mechanism of action it does that by, right? But at the end of the day, they'll use that to their advantage when right now we have tirzepatide and retatrutide available to us that do not have to have any negative implications on your performance, right? They do not. In fact, we are seeing them regularly being used as part of off-season protocols, right, or muscle building protocols. But yet we still have coaches talking about how detrimental these are to muscle tissue. Why? And again, listen, from what I've seen utilizing them with my clients, I think that we have, as per usual with everything, we have people that respond really well to these drugs. And maybe that's not, the person that is going to benefit most from these in terms of like an off-season or muscle development setting. But then again, we have a very large group of people, right, where it allows them a certain level of control where they could potentially be in a growth phase much longer while maintaining lower body fat levels, better carbohydrate utilization, right, or better insulin sensitivity overall, right, better overall health outcomes. And at the end of the day, when we can do that, now we can extend the time frame that somebody's in a muscle building phase, which is the key fundamental concept of building muscle is time. The problem that's gotten in the way of that muscle development for so long, for so many people, is the fact that we push up calories, we end up getting fat, we have side effects from pushing up calories and or the drugs that we might be using in those cases. But again, even if you're not using drugs, you're an all-natural person that wants to build, you're basically limited in terms of the amount of muscle tissue you build by how much fat you put on. So if you're eating all this food, right, and you're putting on all this excess fat, and you're telling yourself, it's okay, I'm bulking, it's not okay. Because you're not bulking at a certain point, you're just getting fat at a certain point. If the GLP-1s come in and help us control that environment, keeps us leaner for longer, then ultimately it's going to be a tool that allows you to build more muscle tissue for longer. Now again, do these have any direct muscle protein synthesis signaling aspect? No, they don't. But again, we're going to be, we're working in a field for the most part, right? For most of our clients that are already doing things to signal for muscle protein synthesis. They are going to the gym and training regularly. You should be feeding them enough protein, obviously, right? And then again, on top of that, we do have so many people nowadays that are casually taking androgens, right? Or some level, whether it's androgens or even peptides that are available now, that they are signaling muscle protein synthesis at an even higher rate, improving their recovery at a higher rate, creating an environment that's more conducive for muscle growth. You're bringing in a low-dose GLP-1, that's not going to interfere with that. It's only going to make it potentially a more effective process over a longer period of time. Right, so again, I know that's a lot. It's an 11-minute video. Obviously, I'm going to break this down into little things that I'll feed, the group and Instagram here. But again, I just think it's one of those things where at this point in the game, to think that there are still people that are demonizing the GLP-1s that are most likely being used right now. I shouldn't say most likely being used. The GLP-1s that I'm seeing being used far more regularly. In fact, I don't see semaglutide being used. I just don't. At this point, I don't see it being prescribed. I don't see any coaches recommending it unless it's very particular instances where we want appetite suppression. And that's the main goal that we're trying to get. Then we're using a small dosage of semaglutide. And even at that, I've put people 300 micrograms a week of semaglutide to be able to get that effect. Right? 300 micrograms. That's not an exaggeration. There's a few of my clients that can message on this and will tell you that we've done that. But at the end of the day, again, understanding that the drugs that are available today, the tirzepatide and retatrutide, to keep demonizing these things and talking shit about these things, you should be losing clients. I hope you lose clients, right? Because at the end of the day, you're not doing a service to the clients that you have, and you're absolutely, putting yourself behind the eight ball in terms of where this industry is going.